I think that feeling cared about is feeling safe with it, which is a primary human need. I can't do my best work, and I probably don't want to do my best work if I'm in sort of a protective mode.
Yeah, probably one of the most important abilities or traits is to be able to communicate through words and actions that they actually care about their people. As an employee, I know my manager advocates for me, has my back, has my best interests at heart.
This sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I'm pissed off at you.
Me specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck. Welcome to another episode of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. I am one of your hosts, Michael Nash, and not with me today is Ethan Nash. We are doing a bit of a solo gig. He's doing some podcasts and I'm doing some podcasts, and hey, no worries. We're not breaking up the team. We're not splitting up the band. We're just doing some solo stuff. So stay tuned, same wavelength, same airwaves. We'll be back together again. I do know it's not airwaves. I know it's not electromagnetic radiation. We're talking zeros and ones, but I'm old and that's the way I talk. And speaking of old, I have with me another old guy, Scott Ummel. Welcome to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast.
Hey, Mike, it's great to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. I'm doing a series of conversations with our team, with our individual Nash Consulting team members, and we're just talking. Scott, you were on the podcast once or twice. Am I remembering this right? A couple years ago? Once.
Yeah, just once.
And was that at least 2 years ago?
I think so. Okay. Yeah.
Well, let's catch everyone up. Scott, how do you meet?
Well, first, I was just going to say, when you were introducing me, there was kind of a tone in your voice that the listeners might be disappointed that Ethan's not here.
That was not the intent. That was not the intent.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. Well, there probably are some disappointed listeners out there, but hopefully they can put up with this for an hour.
We'll have a blast.
Okay. So how did we meet? I think it was in a junior high youth group that you were with one group of people, I was with another group of people, and we kind of just saw each other and didn't pay attention to each other, and knew each other kind of for a couple of years. So youth group. Yeah,
we became fast friends, and then didn't really stay in touch after our early 20s, kind of did our own thing, families, all sorts of stuff. I got into consulting, management training. You became a high-level executive. Where'd you end up, or what'd you end up doing with your career?
You forgot one thing that we don't have to get into, but we did paint your dad's house one summer before our freshman year of college, or before my freshman year of college.
Yeah, we knew nothing about painting, and we did a terrible job. I think we quit. We weren't even done.
Your poor dad.
Not very happy.
He totally got cheated out of whatever it was, a couple $100. All right. So anyways, past that, most of my experience is from the manufacturing environment, where I got to work with lots of different personality types under one roof, from sales and engineering and finance and production planning. And you get pretty good at just working with different personalities, trying to get everybody to come to the table to communicate, and which I shared with you, I think, in some of our lunch conversations, in some pretty tough morale environments. So anyways.
I remember here's my perspective, Scott. We reconnected, we started having lunches and dinners, and we were just talking about life, and you would tell me these stories about your work and you in your executive role and all these really complex people situations you would just navigate with just this artistic, amazing ability to bring people together and to get stuff done. And I, meanwhile, am running this company and I'm just way too busy. I need help. And it just dawned on me one day, dude, you would rock at helping managers manage well. And I posed that question to you. Remember that day I said, what do you think, Scott, about how'd you like to become a consultant?
Yeah, I do remember that. And thank you for really the kind words, by the way. I remember having really mixed emotions like, wow, that sounds really cool. And I have no idea what I would be doing. Right. So it's just, you threw this question out there. And I mean, it was kind of exciting, but kind of scary at the same time. So I think that I put you off for a little while. Just like, oh, Mike, thanks for the compliment. That sounds really nice. And then we'd keep on having, dinners and things. But took a few conversations. So
Yeah, you did. You put me off for a little while. I kept talking to you about it, and you eventually, I don't know, I twisted your arm. You jumped on board. You took a big leap, right? You left your career.
I did.
You joined me, Nash Consulting. It was just me at that time. So we have 10 of us now, and you were the first one.
Right.
And you've been with,
right.
How long have you been working with me?
Yeah, it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years. So I think part of it was timing too. I was ready for a challenge at that point. I kind of had this energy, my girls were out of the house and, I was ready to take on a new challenge. So part of it was timing as well.
Yeah. Well, it's just been an amazing success. I'll just say to the listeners' benefit here, for listeners' benefit, Scott has just rocked it. When he goes out and does trainings and coaching, people just like fall in love with them and they want him back. And he kind of, I'm not using hyperbole to say, I think you changed lives, Scott. You're really, really good at what you do. And we've all learned a ton from you. And so we're going to chat today about some management related. I want to pick your brain and you can pick mine and we'll just have a fun conversation. You have your coffee. This is a coffee time together. You got your...
Yes. Yes. And Thank you for the introduction. I've got my coffee. I think my coffee cup's a little bit bigger than yours.
Yeah, it is actually huge. Yeah, there you go. Hey, Scott, not to quiz you, but what's the difference between processors and expedients when you're teaching behavior skills? Just what are some of the differences between processors and expedients?
Processors and expedients, such an important thing. And I think if people hung out with both you and I for a day, I think they would probably quickly find out. Just through our conversation, through our dialogue, through, let's see, I am on the process side, and I definitely need a little bit more time to process things. And you've learned that about me. So here's a typical example. You started out, you would have said to me 10 years ago, hey, I've got this client and the training's going to happen next week. And are you available? And that's what how you might introduce something. And that's great. And you'd say it in a really nice and kind way. Now you'll say, hey, there's something I'd like you to think about and then get back to me in another hour or two, right? So you give me that process time.
Yeah, I like to think about working with this client, but don't say yes or no. Let's talk later. Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, you're right. You're quite a bit over on the process side. I am way over on the expedient side. And one of the big differences is processors think to talk, expedients talk to think. Listeners, we've done some episodes on behavior styles, just kind of a trick for you, some special skill building here as you work with your clients. As you work with your employees. Processors just are going to do so much better if they you preload the question, you let them know what we're going to be talking about at the meeting. If you're going to be doing any kind of decision making together, you let them know what you're going to be talking about so they can prepare for that. Just a good idea to give people time. The reason I'm saying this all is I just want to point out what happened here today, Scott. How long have you known that we were going to be doing this podcast?
I have known this for, I think, maybe 3 hours tops. Yes. So I got this kind of weird text this morning that said, hey, there's something really fun today and da-da-da. It's like, oh, okay, this sounds fun, right? And then you hit me with it that this podcast would happen. And do you remember my response?
I think I'm looking at my text right now. I think it was some kind of, are you kidding? Or like you thought I was joking.
It was.
Yeah, you thought it was a joke. And I said, dude, let's do it. Oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you, Scott, this is live right now. I forgot to tell you that. We're not recording.
Yes, thank
This
you.
is actually
Okay.
being broadcast right now,
Nice.
live. No, I told you we can, let's have fun. We can cut what we need to cut, but I'm just really impressed that you stepped up to do this. I know it's not fair for me to throw this at you, and I sent you some sample questions. I think you looked at them 15 minutes ago, so we are really just going to go for it.
Yeah. And one other thing I just want to insert in there, what's really cool about that kind of process expedience thing, where you and I are literally on the opposite sides of these spectrums of human behavior. Process and expedient is just one of them. But we kind of have this tagline when we're training on this, and we say where there's trust and respect, those opposites really attract. And there's chemistry and there's synergy, and you cover so much ground. And where there's not that trust and respect, then those opposites tend to repel, and there's tension. So you and I may have had some of those hiccups in the early days. And, I think that what's really fun about training those things is that I can actually give some of those real life examples where you and I are on opposite sides, but really can hit some good momentum together. So
yeah. Well, and I remind our listeners that we tend to match up with people that are opposite. Like that's who we tend to choose as friends, as partners in life. So, we really got to learn to do it. We got to increase the trust and respect, as you're saying, so that those differences can actually complement each other as opposed to, just completely drive us insane. So,
one other thing. Sorry, just one other thing with that. We've done so many of the, process expedients. Just as one example, I typically, when I'm in front of a group, I'll get people nodding their heads yes for that significant other or that best friend. It's almost always true that talk to think versus think to talk, that those opposites generally are together. So I think a lot of our listeners might be nodding their head right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. Well, say all that preamble to say, here we go. And thanks, Scott, for jumping in without a lot of warning and prep time. And let's do it. Our theme today is really going to be general. I mean, we're going to talk about management in general. We're going to talk about what it takes to be excellent, what it takes to manage well. Let me just ask you this, and there's no right answer, honestly, but what would you say is the difference or the differences between a manager who is thriving, a manager who is succeeding, is meeting the needs of their people, is probably really loving their job, versus a manager who is really just struggling and their people have low morale and they're just not doing it. Well, what are some of the key differences when you talk to these two different kinds of managers? Let's set some up.
Yeah, boy, that's a really multi-dimensional question, I think, especially for a processor. I think that, one of the things, probably is in our first 2 hours of our 6-day training would just be the Peter Principle. Somebody that hasn't really been trained with best practice, leadership principles, and has just kind of either had the manager before them or supervisor who was a role model, or they were really, really good at what they did, just in job specific expertise, and then just have not been trained in management skills. So I think somebody's gonna, some people have probably some innate leadership qualities that they can bring to the table, but most people would probably really struggle without training. So that would be one thing that comes to mind.
Okay, so you're saying the first thing comes to mind is like prepared training, skill building, not just being thrust into the role and being told good luck, welcome to management.
Yeah. I guess the Peter Principle is that people tend to get promoted to their level of incompetence, and it sounds kind of demeaning or sarcastic, but it's just so happens so often, in the corporate environment. So.
Yeah, that's so true. That's true. It's sad to see. It happens everywhere. It happens in most places. That's where we come in, right? We help managers learn their best practice skills. Let's talk about some of those other, maybe you mentioned innate. Let's talk about some of those specific traits that set managers apart. I'm going to throw one in, and I'd like to hear what you think about this. I think above all else, it's ability to communicate or demonstrate to the employees that you actually care. That it's that idea that, I look up and I notice that my manager actually cares about me as a human being. That to me,
Yes.
I think that's number one. And I think I have an analogy, and this will be a little ironic knowing what you and I know about each other, because I'm going to use a biblical analogy.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm not a big Bible guy. I used to be, but I'm
Right.
more. There's a verse that says love covers a multitude of sins. And I think there's something to the idea that, we teach the top 15 management skills, and you could not have some of them, right? You could be struggling with some of those skills, not being really good at follow-up or whatever it might be, but your people know you care about them. I just think there's so much more, there's so much more capacity then for you to not be perfect and not do everything right, because for an employee, and why is that? I don't mean to tee you up too much on this, Scott, but why does that matter so much in your opinion?
Yeah, I just, the first thing that also comes to mind with that, with kind of demonstrating that you have that it's not just about you and it's not about your own self-interest or self-centeredness. I think that listening is probably the greatest skill that you can bring to the table. Listening so that somebody feels understood. And I think that just a primary need for humans is to feel understood.
Yeah.
And if I can really demonstrate listening through asking great questions, asking tough questions, not only feeling what somebody feels, but just getting their perspective, that people are going to feel cared about. And so I think that, yeah, just a need to feel understood.
Yeah. So employees who feel understood are going to feel cared about. And I guess that just really matters, right? I'm coming to work every day and I'm doing what I'm doing. And if I don't think my manager cares about me, what happens next? I just feel like if I don't think my manager cares about me, I don't feel like I'm not able to bring my best self, right? I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of being in trouble. I'm afraid of incurring their wrath. I don't know. I just think if I don't feel cared about, I'm not able to show up in the best way possible.
Yes.
Would you concur with that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I know it sounds really general, but it doesn't, I think that feeling cared about is also feeling safe with it, which is another primary human need. I can't do my best work, and I probably don't want to do my best work if I'm in sort of a protective mode or in survival mode. So I can feel more, I guess, open and free to do my best work without sort of any fear of kind of repercussions or my boss not having my back.
Yeah, that's really good. So training, right? Equipping a manager through making sure they have best practice skills. We've covered a manager, probably one of the most important abilities or traits or skills is to be able to communicate through words and actions that they actually care about their people. And we're not saying that they're best friends or they're even friends outside of work. We're not talking about that kind of thing. We're just saying, as an employee, I know my manager advocates for me, has my back, has my best interests at heart. That to me, those are two of probably the most important things that a manager can bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would add in kind of that top tier stuff that we want our managers, that stuff set managers apart, the successes from the ones that are struggling?
Yeah, I think, boy, couple of things just come to mind. I think if I feel empowered, I think that also means that I feel trusted.
That's good.
So I think trust is just going to be, again, we use that word so much, but I think that it covers so much ground.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So I feel I'm trained, I feel cared about, and I feel trusted. That's actually pretty big. You talk a lot in your work about autonomy, and as one of those major needs that we have as human beings. And so my manager willing to trust me enough to not micromanage me, to give me some latitude, to let me make decisions, right? That's a huge motivator for me to show up with my best self.
I think delegation is just such an important part of that feeling empowered
Yeah.
and then having some sense of control.
Yeah. So again, what's setting these managers apart? Showing that they care about their people, not just as cogs or producers, right? A manager who gives their people trust, autonomy, control. How about
Empowers.
empowers them.
One other thing I want to say with that, Mike, that I think is really, really important. I think that in order for that to happen, I just feel, and I'd love to talk about this a little bit. I really feel like humility is just such an important characteristic or trait of a leader. And I don't think any of those things can happen if a leader isn't leading with humility.
Let's do that. That's brilliant. It's almost like this trifecta we're getting at here, right? It's showing caring. I have your best interest at heart. Giving you autonomy, empowering you, giving you control, trusting you. So there's two really huge. I mean, if we had to pick three, I think these are the three, because I'm with you, right? A manager who is able to show up with some humility. Let's talk about how that shows up and why even psychologically that is so important for the employee. I'll let you start, right? Let's say a little bit more about humility.
Yeah, I mean, boy, it's so multidimensional. And I think, one thing, just kind of backing up as we go into humility, I'm just also thinking, I brought up that I'd listened to Stephen Covey, interviewed author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it was a random seminar probably about 10 years ago, but I wrote it down because it was just such a powerful sentence. Somebody asked him his definition of leadership, and he answered with communicating someone's worth and potential so clearly they're inspired to see it in themselves.
Say that again.
Yeah, communicating someone's worth and potential so clearly they're inspired to see it in themselves.
Wow, it's beautiful.
And I think that that's just a really good place to start with that. I think that a leader that is practicing humility, or that it is humble, is able to do that. Has the resources, has the internal sort of self-worth to be able to inspire someone, to maybe even see somebody's blind spot that they're not seeing, whether it's not serving that person or whether it's a hidden talent or potential in there. That a leader has that capacity to be able to see that in their employees.
You've said some really deep stuff there that we could get into. You mentioned has enough self-worth to be able to do that. There's some deep stuff there. Let me circle back to that in a minute. Humility. So you're humble enough to be able to focus on the other person's growth and potential and help them see that. I think you're also, I think a manager who shows up with humility is a manager who's approachable, right? A manager who asks for feedback, who doesn't get really defensive when they do get feedback, who says, I don't know, can you help me? Who says, I was wrong, I'm sorry. I mean, these are the kinds of behaviors that make a manager, you used the word safe earlier, that make a manager safe, right? If I have a manager who is willing to show up as a human being with their flaws, ask for feedback, even a manager who says, hey, I don't want you always to agree with me, right? Disagree with me so that we can get to the right answer or to the best answer, right? A manager who shows up that way is a manager that I'm going to trust. I'm going to be able to be more likely to show up humble myself, more authentic.
Yes.
Right. I just think that is such an important piece, is this humility.
Yeah, I think so too. And it also means that manager is going to be approachable, right? Which is also linked to that safety. Yeah, humility, I think it means that, I understand what my strengths are, I understand what my weaknesses are, and I understand the strengths in others that might compensate for my own weaknesses, and that way we can be a better team together. And I'm willing to, I guess, have conversations about that, to admit that, even though there's a power differential there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So now I'm picturing this leader, this manager who has been trained, which is where you started, and is able to embody this trifecta, right? They show caring, they show that they care about me as an employee, they trust me, they exercise smart trust, right? They give me latitude when that's wise. They give me control, they give me decision making authority, they don't micromanage me. They show humility, which makes them approachable, which allows me to be more authentic, which makes it safe to make a mistake or to suggest something or to disagree. And we're painting a pretty beautiful picture of the type of environment that I think would make it more likely that an employee would thrive.
yes. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, were you
No, go ahead.
Do you think it's possible for a leader to demonstrate humility who is struggling with their own self-worth? What kind of challenge does that present, if it does?
Yeah, well, 3 podcasts there we could do, man. Seriously,
Yeah.
so much depth. I'll just say on a first stab at it, I'd say that all 3 of those trifecta pieces, humility, showing caring, and giving control or autonomy, right? I think all of those would be so much harder if I didn't like myself. I think as a leader, our sense of self, if it's very fragile, if I'm barely holding on, the way I see myself, I don't like who I am. It's going to be so hard to be able to give those things because I'm actually, unconsciously or not, I'm way more committed to self-preservation. I'm way more committed to self-protection and making myself feel better about myself, because nobody likes that feeling of feeling terrible about self, right? We do everything we can to avoid that. So that means putting you down so I can feel better, right? That means making sure that I stay in control so that it turns out right, so I don't get blamed.
It means taking the credit.
Credit.
Yeah,
not admitting a mistake, not admitting that I have even any weaknesses, because I already feel like my Mike Nash negative bucket is full, right? And if you were to give me another bit of feedback that kind of pokes me, I can't handle that because I already feel so crappy about myself, so I'm going to be defensive, right? So all sorts of reasons why I would think that if I didn't have at least moderate sense of self, I'm going to have a really difficult time practicing these traits. Is that what you think, Scott?
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. I don't think I could add much to that. I really, I struggle with this even in working with leaders where that can be apparent. And I guess the part that I struggle with is that I know that I really need to work with somebody on kind of that self-talk or what that narrative is before they can really demonstrate those leadership behaviors. It's again, Stephen Covey concept, start with self, right? I have to kind of start with the inner narrative rather than the outer behaviors. So it's kind of the cart before the horse otherwise.
I want to add to that, maybe a little different direction, but let me go back and ask you, if you don't mind. So, and this is again putting you on the spot, but what would you do? How do you help a leader develop a stronger sense of self? What are some of the things you would do in your coaching that would help a leader grow in that area?
Yeah, I think part of it may just be organic, just through a coaching relationship as I'm noticing things through dialogue, and we're typically our coaching contracts are 4 months, so you really get into some deep conversations, even about scenarios at work, or sometimes you even get into things from the past. and you can notice patterns. And I think sometimes people can just kind of be on this autopilot or just say things unconsciously that maybe I'll bring to the surface, and there's some awareness there. Hey, Mike, do you notice that, whenever you've done something good or you say something, you always qualify it with, it wouldn't have happened if, and maybe you kind of diminish your own sort of accomplishment or something. So I may notice some things like that and just bring that into awareness. I would also encourage somebody to just start being aware of some of those things that do arise, in their everyday, some of those negative emotions and some of the negative self-talk that comes out, some of that narrative, and maybe catch themselves in that. So,
wow.
What about you?
Well,
what are your thoughts?
Well, I want to kind of praise you because you're some good points there. So you're building a relationship is what I'm hearing. This is in the context of a relationship. So there's some trust being built. They're able to show up. They're able to become authentic with you. You're helping them observe and notice some things, some patterns. You're working on self-talk, which I'm assuming includes some corrective self-talk. Maybe what are some of the true messages they can be giving themselves? I depending on where they're at, I would totally agree with those things. Sometimes I just literally gently not redirect, but maybe move them toward a therapeutic relationship with a therapist, to help them with some of these struggles. I'm, as you know, a big fan of meditation and all that, the good that brings in terms of learning to accept self. And
right.
I think we're on this track of helping a leader grow in self-esteem so that they are more likely to be able to demonstrate these traits. The thing that I was going to maybe qualify that you said earlier was, I actually totally agree with the inside first, inside first, outside. But I also think they can be done simultaneously. I think that's for me, it's a matter of, I think you would agree. We don't just let's spend a year working on self and then start showing up better to our employees. Right? Let's do both, right? So can I practice humility even while I'm learning humility, right? Can I practice phrases like I was wrong and what do you think? And, et cetera. Can I work on how to become less defensive in my behaviors, even while I'm working on becoming less defensive internally, right?
Right. No, I think that's so important. And I think with that, with both, kind of the internal mindset and then the behaviors accompanying the mindset, I think that what can happen is you have this feedback loop, right? And by demonstrating maybe some of those behaviors of humility, something like that, there's, I think the feedback loop is, wow, I'm really watching this person or helping this person grow or excel or get better, right? And that can be, I don't know if this is the right wording, but that can be where the self-worth comes from, actually contributing to somebody else's success, rather than it having to be your own.
That's good. Yeah, I like that feedback loop. Wow. Okay. So managers that thrive are going to be trained, we've decided. They're going to be demonstrating this trifecta of showing caring. They're going to be showing humility. They're going to be giving autonomy and trust. So these are four of the biggies, right? We've discussed that undergirding most of that is at least some level of self-esteem and a sense of self that needs to be at least examined. Do you mind if I change gears here on you?
No, I'd like to just say two more things before I forget, and they're super quick. One would be, I go back to just that healthy power differential that we've been talking about. What are those kind of sweet spot behaviors that create psychological safety or make a manager more approachable, which I think makes them a great manager? And one would just be consistency. And that I am not overreacting to one thing one week, or which boss is showing up today. That just wreaks havoc on this kind of uncertainty for people. So I think that's one of the things that I really think is important.
No, that's good. Thank you for adding that, and whatever else you want to add here. But that's, yeah. So this consistency you're talking about is the idea that it kind of gets to the fact that I can sort of trust you as my manager, in the sense that I'm trusting that the person that's showing up today is going to be relatively like the person who's going to show up tomorrow.
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
going to have to be afraid, of who you're going to be tomorrow. Are you going to be in a bad mood?
Right.
Are you going to be this
Right.
or that? And it doesn't mean I'm asking you to be robotic and, never waver, right? But those extremes of highs and lows and mad and not mad just makes me
Yeah.
not able to trust you. So I'm on edge and I'm in self-protection mode and I can't bring my best self.
Yes. Yes. That's anxiety. It's going to create anxiety.
Yeah.
For people, it would just that unknown, and also really kind of distract them from their work, because I'm paying attention to something that doesn't feel safe.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think that, and the only other thing that I was going to say is that I think just transparency, being authentic and just being transparent, I think is really going to build that trust along with that consistency.
Say more about
those
that.
are the only other.
Say more about transparency, would you?
Yeah, I think transparency, boy, from a trust perspective, I'm declaring my intentions. I'm not let people guess what my intentions are. I'm not letting people guess and sort of fill in the story or fill in the gaps, because we're going to fill in those gaps with worst case scenarios just from kind of our negativity bias. And so I'm just being proactive in my communication, and I'm being transparent in my expectations. I'm being transparent in how I show up every day. So
giving me information, filling in the blanks for me, telling me the why, explaining the why behind the decisions or behind other decisions that are made in the organization.
Yes, feedback, both positive and constructive.
Wow. Okay. So it dawns on me that as I list now these, you've ruined my trifecta. Thank you. Now I have to come up with
sorry.
5. We got 5 things now, right? Which are great. So I'm showing caring to my people, that I care about them. I'm giving them trust, autonomy, etc. I am showing humility, which makes me approachable, etc. I'm showing up consistently, so you don't have to wonder which boss you're getting today. And I'm being transparent. I'm telling you the why. I'm sharing information. Okay, so these 5 things, again, I know we've said this, but it dawns on me that all 5 of those things as an employee make me feel safe, right? I think that's the bottom line. Those 5 things help me to feel safe, which means I'm going to be more likely to be in sort of parasympathetic nervous system mode. I'm going to be not triggered. I'm going to be more likely to be able to be creative and collaborative, and etc.
Yes. I'm not going to be in a reactive sort of survival mode. I'm going to be in a problem-solving mode. I'm going to be in a reflective mode where I can not be sort of reflexive or reactive.
Yes.
I can be proactive.
Yes. And much more likely to be able to, back to your author, Stephen Covey, to volunteer my heart and my brain, right? I'm much more likely to be able to to have ownership, to really invest and to engage.
Yes.
Wow, good stuff.
Yeah, I like that. And it does bring back to that. I know every time you say something, I kind of expand on it, but I also, that can pay me for my back and my hands, but I volunteer my heart and my brain. There's something internal. There's something where that's I want to, not I have to.
Perfect.
And there's just such a difference between those 2 things from, what I'm giving to the organization. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's deep and beautiful. You know what? That's actually so good. I don't even want to change topics. I think we want to summarize and maybe close up here, because I think I don't want to. I had a whole different direction, but let's maybe save that for another conversation.
Okay.
So at the risk of being redundant, let's just go through these things really quickly again. So we're starting with avoiding the Peter principle. Make sure our managers are trained and we're not just promoting people because they were good at what they were doing before, right? But then we've talked about these 5 really important, should we call them traits, behaviors, ways of showing up? We start with, doesn't matter what order we're in, but I'll start with what I think is the big one. I'm showing my people that I actually care about them as human beings. That's one. Scott?
Yeah, and to undergird that, I think listening is really the best way that you can do that. Showing people that you have their best interest at heart, at least that's a good start. I would then choose humility next, just demonstrating humility, that I'm confident, but I'm also aware of my opportunities and weaknesses, and I'm also able to communicate other strengths that I might not have. So humility is going to be important.
And that makes me approachable and safe. Good. I'll add number 3 is trusting my people, finding opportunities to give them autonomy bumps, to give them control, to give them decision-making authority, to show them that I trust and respect them enough to let them do the thing without me micromanaging. So there's number 3. How about one?
Yeah, 4? And then I think we talked about consistency, that I'm showing up emotionally consistent, which Scott is showing up today, that we don't want to have employees show up with that kind of dilemma or that anxiety. So emotional consistency in my behavior. I think being consistent and transparent. We also talked about transparency, that I'm transparent about declaring my intentions. Again, Stephen Covey will say, state it, signal it, clarify it, discuss it, choose the intentions that serve the other person, that serve the organization. And so that transparency about feedback, I'm transparent about constructive feedback, as well as recognizing and appreciating people, that I'm not holding back in that regard.
Sharing information, sharing the why. Yeah. And then all those 5 things add up to many things, but they certainly produce an environment where that employee is going to feel safe, going to feel more likely to engage, volunteer their heart and their brain. Good. Wow. Good stuff. Deep stuff. So I want to wrap up, but thanks everyone for listening. Scott, I'm going to ask you to help me with the wrap up. We have a Managing with Mind and Heart workshop series that we want to bring to you. We want to bring into your company. This workshop is something we do offer occasionally as a public offering, but I think there's something really powerful about coming in and working with your leadership community, right? And helping bring your people up to a level of excellence in management. Scott, if this is totally putting you on the spot, sell it to me, man. Like why should my company hire Nash Consulting to come and do Managing with Mind and Heart?
Well, anybody that could just be a fly on the wall for all of our consultants when we get together. I mean, there's just such a environment of caring and laughter and conviction and fun. And so when our consultants go into these training environments, I mean, it's about interacting with people. It's so interactive. So we're introducing these topics. We're doing small group discussions. We're facilitating those discussions. Different groups are learning from each other. We're learning from groups. So it's a real learning environment. And then I think there's a lot of fun too. There's just a lot of energy in there. So you and I have always said this, and it was 10 years ago, is that, I mean, the best, I think, reference for Nash Consulting is the fact that we get companies coming back to us year after year to ask us back for new cohorts, new managers, new onboarding.
Well, good. And we're tooting our own horns here, but I think we focus so much on everything you said, Scott, and very practical, right? These are actual skills you can take to work tomorrow, and you can improve your management abilities right now. And that's what we've been hearing for years and years and years. Probably the most braggy thing we'll say here, we've had many people say this to us. In fact, I just had someone say this lately, best management training I've ever attended. So that's what we think is true. And folks out there, if you're interested, nashconsulting.com. Scott, thank you so much for chatting today. That was very fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.